Is this the bit where I get to say, how's my hair look?
Yes.
My name's Tom Whitter, and I've been part of making a lot of James's films over the last, 10, 11 years now, I suppose.
Yeah, at least. No, more.
Maybe more.
Might be getting on for 15. I'm James May. I work for Tom Whitter, the esteemed director. Oh, I know that. That was in the kitchen at Plum Pictures, because I'd already made some TV with them, the original Toy Story series, and then we were going to make Man Lab, and Will, who's the executive at Plum Pictures, said, "Oh, I want you to meet Tom. He's done some quite good stuff," he said.
And actually, I knew that he was doing stuff with you, and I thought of some really, truly terrible ideas.
Did you?
So I sent him an email, yeah.
I didn't know that. What were your terrible ideas?
I can't, to be honest, I really can't remember now. I think they were pretty similar to sort of type engineering-y, Man Lab-y stuff. But it wasn't as chaotic and messed up as the whole Man Lab thing turned out to be. But yeah, so that's how that happened.
The cheap, I think, is the predominantly. It was cheap, and it was isn't that where we invented the concept of jazz TV? Which is that we knew roughly what we were going to do, but we never really wrote any scripts. I mean, I sometimes used to, write bits a few minutes before we recorded them, but we just sort of did it and saw what happened, didn't we? It was just genuinely experimental. Well,
it was really experimental because it's the only time I've ever done a series where we had no set. We didn't have anything to start with. It was just literally an empty space.
Well, it wasn't even empty, was it? Because one of the first we used to just hire sort of workshopy type places from anybody who would rent one to us. And I think the first one was, what did they do, those people? They sort of imported and exported props for TV and film and
huge kind
festivals.
Of stone Buddhas. They had at one point they had a glut of stone Buddhas that they couldn't seem to shift, and they were just all over the place. And
there was a giant Ganesh that we couldn't tidy away because it was too heavy. It weighed something like 2 tons, and it just had to stay in the shot all the time. And it was known as the elephant in the room, wasn't it? Because you couldn't move it.
No one seemed to question it though.
No one ever mentioned it. And we didn't mention it. Nobody ever said, why have you got a giant Lord Ganesh in the back of shots when you're talking about woodwork or something completely unrelated? But it was just part of the set.
And also, I think we say we invented jazz TV. Well, we did, but it was out of necessity because of the first series, we had about 25 shooting days, which might seem like a lot, but to do a whole series, and we weren't just stuck in the workshop, we were going all over the place trying to film things, and it was shoestring. And because we were begging and borrowing stuff, we never knew exactly what we were going to be filming next. And so quite often we simply weren't ready for it, but we thought we'd give it a go.
Yeah.
And that's where it sort of came from.
And we used everything, and nothing went on the floor in Man Lab, did it? I don't think we ever filmed anything that we threw away and thought, this is rubbish. We thought it was rubbish, but we'd still put it in.
Well, the one scene when I realised that it was a complete failure was...
I know what you're going to say. Yeah.
It's the only scene where I've had that sinking feeling from the second I said action. We had a researcher at the time, a chap called Rory, who's gone on to greater things. But he had an idea that he thought, I know what's a good man skill, is I'm going to show the world how you can cut your own hair. And I thought, oh, really? Okay, well, let's give it a go. It'll be fantastic. And it wasn't.
He just looked like someone who'd cut his own hair.
It just was the same action again and again. And so you take a bit off here, then you take a bit off here, then you take a bit off.
But a slightly different amount off here than you took off there. Well, it made us quite lazy. When we made Cars of the People, which was the first and only time we've attempted a sort of fairly serious factual documentary with historical facts in that people could check and might even know, we did actually script most of that. I mean, some of it I remember writing quite a bit of it on the train on the way to Germany, was it? We went on the train? I can't.
Well, it was everywhere. It was like this terrible thing, like this film with all these people were gradually catching you up. So over my shoulder I was saying, oh my God, there's this scene and there's that scene, but we haven't written either. It's like you really literally haven't done your homework, and it got a bit dicey at some point.
It did get a bit dicey, yes. And also because we were making a film essentially about old cars, obviously none of them would ever work properly because old cars don't. So even a 911 from Porsche's own museum didn't work, did it? It only ran on 5 cylinders and the seat collapsed. It was just hopeless.
And the TVR.
Yeah, the TVR. The TVR did actually simply break. We just left that bloke, didn't we? Somewhere by the side of the road.
Yeah, this TVR thing, this guy had taken, I think, a slight shine to one of our production staff. And because we didn't have many people, everybody was manning a camera or driving the car to film the star car. And every time the TVR broke down, we'd have to leave. I can't remember who it was now, but it was one of the production staff would have to be left with this guy in the middle of nowhere while we radioed frantically for someone to come and rescue them. But it didn't happen once, it happened about 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, but the call was for somebody to come and rescue her, not the car.
No, it was fine, but some very awkward sort of German stilted conversations would ensue.
Meine Katze ist klug.
But also, I think it's worth pointing out that people quite often, I think if you look at certain like American TV production, it can be literally casts of thousands and dozens of people involved. And yet pretty much every film we've done has been a tiny setup, really.
Yeah, and generally a pretty small budget as well. But maybe again, we were very ahead of our time and we sort of preempted the YouTube era. It's interesting that if you go on Amazon, this isn't a plug, but if you go on Amazon, Man Lab is available on there, the original series. And it's, a few people have watched it. There's one excellent review that says something like, this is one of the greatest television programs ever made, at least a decade ahead of its time, and it will be studied at a university level in the future. I wrote that. Well, I know where he lives and his phone number. He's quite organised, Tom. He gets very excited about what we're going to do, and he does quite a few things that possibly I ought to have done. He finds things out that maybe I should have found out. Tom's very good on things like 20th century political history, for example. So he will chuck in a fact that I can later use. It re-emerges as my knowledge, but it's actually come from Tom. So, sorry if I sounded as if I was struggling there to think of something good. Oh, God. He makes me do things he knows I don't like. And if there's something I really like doing, like making something out of wood on a lathe, he will just, I will do a piece to camera and I'm very excited explaining what I'm doing and what tool I'm using and why I'm using that one and why I've sharpened it and how we go about the sequence of operations. And Tom will just cut all that out, slow the film down and put Rachmaninoff on it for about 5 or 6 seconds and then move on to the next thing.
Well, I know, but I think film, this might sound quite sort of arty-farty, but film does have a language, doesn't it? And it has a rhythm. It's like, he got very cross.
Yes, it's the slow movement from Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto.
But you got very exercised at the Yamaha Piano Factory because we really didn't have time to have you re-stringing that practice grand. And I could tell the Japanese were very polite, but they were kind of doing the equivalent of looking at their watches and saying, we must move on, we must move on. And you'd had a go, and it hadn't worked very well. And I figure that is the true. We've captured the essence of that scene.
But the second one would have been so much better. Do you know how they got out of this problem? They simply turned the lights off and left. I was left on my own in this training room in the dark with a half-strung piano. That was it. That was their way of saying, we're moving on to the next scene. Maybe I should have read the signs earlier. I don't know. Shall I leave for this bit?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, not.
Well, he shows up on time and he's very enthusiastic about certain things. He's very good at doing piece to cameras, which, if you think about it, is quite a useful skill.
In TV, not everybody's got it in TV.
No, they don't. And to get complicated ideas across and keep people engaged, I think is a really great thing. If you're standing behind the camera and you're saying, the storytelling is just wonderful. It saves you having to do lots of other dressing up in the background, like you don't necessarily need a super expensive location. It's like you don't need to book the Taj Mahal if a comedian's going to tell a really good joke, do you? Because it just works.
But you still cut out my best ever piece to camera about Japanese porcelain.
Did I?
Yes, when we were in Satsuma. prefecture or whatever it's
Oh,
called.
yeah.
It was so long, this piece of camera, that I had to sit down in the middle of it, and the cameraman also sat down because we were a bit tired, and then we regained our strength and stood up and continued walking. It was great. Tom threw it away.
There is, yeah, as I say, film has its own language and its own pace, and after a bit, it was a magnificent. It was about 5.5 minutes.
It was
just
very
went
long.
on and on.
Full of detail.
Yeah, we've got it somewhere if you're keen. I think that's James' major contribution. He's also very good at sort of looking after people on the team as well.
Oh, thank you.
So James doesn't disappear into a limousine at the end of a shoot and disappear in a puff of smoke. And I don't think the only time I've seen you try to get preferential treatment was when you were being chased around that airport in Russia by about 2,000 people, and you try to hide in the executive lounge. Do you remember?
Oh yeah, that was in. Was that in the Toliatigrad airport? Was it the other? Yes.
I think it was in Moscow.
No, maybe it was. Yeah, yes, I do remember that. And they wouldn't let us in the executive lounge, though, would they?
No,
well, they would if we paid €500 or something.
5,000 euros.
Oh, was it 5,000? Yeah. That's more than we spent on the entire show. Go on, get it off your chest.
I'm not sure we're allowed to talk about this, because back in the day when James used to smoke cigarettes, he was terrible at bringing smokes on the shoot, and at one point we actually had it in the call sheet. The only instruction was James to bring his own. That's about it, really. I think sometimes you're a bit of a wuss when it comes to, one thing I've never understood is that you're a qualified pilot, or you were a qualified pilot, and you've done all kind of manner of exciting, dangerous things. But trying to get you to cycle over a bridge in Japan, I was called a Scottish greeting by you over the intercom.
You were,
yeah,
which doesn't happen very often. But it's because I told you I wouldn't like it, because it was high up. There was an open railing on the side, and there were people on bicycles coming the other way, which meant I had to stay to that side. And it was windy, and I don't really like windiness. I remember this bridge, it was something like 2.5 miles long, that bridge, wasn't it? And I went over it, and they tracked me from a car, and we got to the other end, and Tom said, right, we'll just have to do that again. So I had to cycle back across, so I had to do it 3 times. I hated it.
You told me once that you have a particular fear of wind because it goes back to your childhood. Is that it?
Yes, as a child, as a small boy, I must have seen something on the television or in a cartoon or something. I believed that I would be blown away, sort of a bit Mary Poppins-like, and blown up into the sky and blown away and land in the sea or something. And I think a little bit of me still believes it.
That you might just get blown away.
I might be blown away, yeah.
And so never see your parents again, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. I just see my mum diminishing as I don't like really windy days.